asking others around the country to send intensive care nurses to help them. The call-out went out last night after the number of people in ICU across the region reached 8, with 3 of them on ventilators. Health correspondent Rowan Quinn has more.
The highly specialised nurses provide round-the-clock one-on-one care, and without them, patients can't be moved into intensive care. There's a nationwide shortage, and it's been exacerbated in Auckland by the current COVID outbreak. The Director-General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says other nurses and healthcare assistants are also needed to help the city. Questions are being raised about how prepared the DHBs were, with Auckland Hospital currently doing building work to create space for COVID patients.
The government says any New Zealanders living abroad who are considering a short trip home to New Zealand to think again. The pause on applications for border MIQ has been extended to help officials safely house the growing number of people with the virus. The COVID-19 response Minister Chris Hipkins says New Zealand expats should leave any available MIQ spaces to those who really need them.
Now is not a good time to come home for a holiday with the intention of returning back to where you are. We do need you to play your part by allowing those vouchers to be available for those in the greatest need.
The pause on applications for border MIQ does not apply to emergency allocations. The Director-General of Health says the latest modelling shows Delta outbreak cases are declining overall. The R value, or reproductive number, needs to be below 1. If it's above 1, then the virus is spreading. Ashley Bloomfield says it's almost certain the outbreak is not spreading.
Based on the latest modelling, that continues to be promising, and there's a 90% probability that remains under 1 with the numbers coming through over the last few days, indicating that the number of cases will continue to decline and we are successfully breaking the chains of transmission.
75 new cases of COVID-19 in the community have been reported today. 1 is in Wellington, all others are in Auckland. A man has died following an incident at Police Custody Unit in Auckland. Police say the man, who was in his 20s, was taken to Middlemore Hospital after he attempted to injure himself at South Auckland's Manukau Custody Unit on Monday. Kate Gregan reports.
The man was arrested in the suburb of Otara after breaching his electronically monitored bail conditions. Police say he began displaying unusual behaviour and became aggressive on the way to the custody unit. Officers say his behaviour became more erratic and he tried to injure himself after being placed in his cell. Custody staff put him in a restraint chair and placed him under constant monitoring, but his condition deteriorated shortly after. He was taken to Middlemore Hospital but died yesterday. Superintendent Jill Rogers says investigations are underway.
A 15-year-old was among queues of people at the opening of Auckland's first drive-through vaccination centre at a marae today. Papakura Marae in the city's south is hoping to vaccinate 500 people a day. Māori GP Matere Harwood and teenage son Te Rangiora Royal were ecstatic to be vaccinated at a place they felt at home.
We were invited to go to the vaccine centre at the airport over the weekend, and I talked to him about it, but he said, no Mum, I want to do it in my own community. So that's why we came here. That's Māori GP Matere Harwood. The extent of flood damage is becoming clearer in West Auckland following yesterday's deluge, although authorities can't yet say how many houses are uninhabitable. Bethells Beach remains cut off due to a washed-out road. At least 2 families will be in emergency housing tonight, with others staying with family and friends. In Taupaki, a group of boot camp companions have been helping to make their trainer's house livable. Mike Lockton is among them.
Lots of the things in the shed have been destroyed. The back garage, which is a sleep out, a lot of the furniture in there has been destroyed. So it's just going through and just trying to get out what we can and salvage what we can, and what we can't is going in the skip.
Police say they will be patrolling flood-hit West Auckland this evening. Moving now into sport, New Zealand athletes are strong medal contenders going into several finals at the Tokyo Paralympics tonight. Sophie Pascoe will chase a 4th medal in these games in the final of the 200 metres SM9 medley. Pascoe easily won her heat to post the fastest qualifying time. She told TVNZ that's a benefit.
First time obviously being ranked first into a final here. It's nice to be in those yellow lanes, especially for the 200 AM. gives me a little perspective around the pool, see what's going on.
Also chasing medals tonight are Nikita Howarth, Tupou Neufi, Jessie Reynolds and Danielle Aitchison. World number one Novak Djokovic overcame a mid-match wobble before beating Danish teenager Holger Rune to win his opening US Open match. Djokovic easily won the first set 6-1, but then lost the second in a tie-break before taking the next two 6-2 and 6-1, with Rune struggling with cramp. The Black Caps go into their opening T20 against Bangladesh in Dhaka tonight as underdogs. The home side are coming off a 4-1 series win over Australia. And that's the news.
A 10th gold for Sophie Pascoe.
When I looked up, it was just pure amaze. I actually couldn't believe it.
Takeaways make a return south of Auckland.
They are preparing for the hordes to arrive, so there's road cones in place, stretching way back down to the side of the mall.
And Corin's dog Stanley gets a telling off.
Stanley doesn't deserve to win anything. Did you see the mess he made when you got up? He got into 2 boxes of muesli bars and ate them all, left the wrappers all over the floor. Very naughty dog.
All in order. Morning reports weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
Te reo irirangi o Aotearoa, funded through New Zealand On Air. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight pare Thursday. For Northland, rain today with a few heavy falls in the east, cloudy periods and a few showers tomorrow. For Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, cloudy periods and a few showers, but mainly dry about the city. For Waikato to Wellington, including Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country, also wide and upper, fine apart from a few cloudy areas. For Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mostly cloudy with a few showers, clearing to become fine in Hawke's Bay tomorrow morning. For Buller, Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine, a few afternoon showers about the ranges tomorrow. For Otago and Southland, mainly fine, but some brief rain overnight. For Westland and Fiordland, rain or showers spreading into Fiordland today and Westland tonight, then gradually clearing tomorrow. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and a few light showers. That concludes the short forecast from Met Service to midnight pare Thursday. It's 7 minutes past 5.
Nā mihi, Sarah. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The system is groaning under the pressure of Delta. The government's extended its freeze on releasing any new MIQ vouchers, saying accommodating infected people and their families is the priority. Offshore Kiwis wanting to holiday back home are being told to stay away. And the government's culling some group bookings, including for seasonal workers. Reinforcements are on the way for 3 Auckland DHBs that have 32 Delta patients in their hospitals. 8 are in high dependency or intensive care units, and 3 of them currently need help breathing. The Director General of Health has indicated staff are being redeployed from other parts of the country to the hospitals and to 2 new quarantine facilities being set up in Auckland. Now, that includes ICU specialist nurses. Ko taku manuhiri in INA ko Kate Weston from the New Zealand Nurses Organisation, and Kate joins me now. Kia ora, Kate. Can you just lay out for us the very real challenges facing these Auckland DHBs with Delta and all these patients in hospital?
Kia ora. Yes, thank you. So for our nurses and healthcare workers working in Auckland, they have been doing a stellar job actually providing the support that's necessary to those people who are unwell in their whānau. In hospital now, we're starting to see, unfortunately, it was predictable that, initially we've been managing and fighting the COVID battle in primary care. So I've seen our nurses and healthcare workers stand up the testing, stand up the vaccinations, and now we are unfortunately seeing people who are needing hospitalisation and some who are needing that extra support, as you say, to help with their breathing. So it is putting a lot of pressure on a workforce who unfortunately came into this particular Delta outbreak at a point of not much left in the tank. We've been through winter, we've had the RSV, and unfortunately we know that there's been some very chronic understaffing issues across Aotearoa for nurses, and in particular we are aware of shortages for critical care nurses, and that the cavalry's not coming. We have to make do with the very finite nursing workforce that we've got in New Zealand.
So Kate, the call has gone out for reinforcements in Auckland, people who are willing to redeploy from other parts of the country. How many are they needing, and what sort of specialist skill set?
I'm aware that they have put out a call for nurses who have got particularly intensive care, cardiac and trauma experience as one group, and that's so that they can provide support, not necessarily for patients with COVID, but rather allowing the workforce there to focus on that, but providing the support for other patients coming through who are needing those services.
And how many, Kate, are they needing?
I don't know that exact number. You would need to ask the DHBs directly as to how many they are needing. But knowing that there was pre-existing vacancy, there will be gaps. And we are aware that the gaps have been made more serious because some of their workforce have had to be stood down as household contacts or isolating themselves. Some have just taken, naturally they're unwell themselves for other reasons, or they've had childcare commitments. So there have been a number of gaps that have been exacerbated, unfortunately, and now we're needing to be able to provide some relief to those nurses, particularly in intensive care.
Kate, I've got a document in front of me from the DHB that says they need 30 ICU-trained nurses. Now, in the scheme of things, is that achievable, and where do they come from?
It's going to be a significant challenge because we've got, as I understand it, about 97 vacancies outside of the Auckland region. So there will be challenges, and the concern for us is that we're absolutely concerned to support those nurses and healthcare workers in Auckland and Greater Auckland, counties Manukau, Waitemata, ADHB. But in doing so, we don't want to take from the regions because they don't have a huge pool of people that they can donate or offer to provide support, because once they're gone, if there was a situation that required an immediate stand-up of a response back in their home DHB, then that's going to make it much harder to be able to do in a really quick time frame.
So, Kate, potentially, if these specialist nurses are transferred, redeployed in Auckland, it could leave services wanting in the districts that they have left behind.
That's a risk that would really have to be weighed up with the nurses who are offering themselves to come forward, and they would need, NZNO's concern is that there would be the support for those nurses needs to be there to allow that to happen. But there would absolutely need to be conversations about, can the regions actually afford to let them go? So it's a real balancing act to provide the necessary support in the Greater Auckland region, but not to do it at the expense of leaving other areas understaffed more so than they are already.
What conversations are being had about transferring potentially ICU patients, non-Delta patients, but ICU patients out of Auckland to other regions?
My understanding is the preference is at this stage to bring staff and mobilise staff to Level 4 Auckland rather than take patients away from their whānau support and moving now from alert levels crossing boundaries. So Auckland remains at the higher level 4, and to take patients out of the Level 4 area into a lower COVID-free at this moment area elsewhere would be with some degree of risk associated with it. But
it is still an option that is on the table if they cannot get the numbers.
I'm not aware of those discussions. I've been aware of discussions about mobilising staff to come in to the Auckland area rather than put patients out.
Kate, is there an orderly queue from outside of Auckland forming for those people who wish to come and help the Auckland DHBs?
I understand that there's been a small amount of interest, but this is actually a big ask for people to come for effectively a tour of duty in Auckland and to leave their home and their whānau and their own commitments. So NZNO will be working with the Ministry and the DHBs around what that would look like to ensure that everybody in the equation is properly supported.
Good to talk to you, Kate. That is Kate Weston from the New Zealand Nurses Organisation. Adjust your expectations and cancel your summer holiday plans. That's the government's message to New Zealanders abroad thinking of a quick trip home. The government has extended its pause on new bookings for managed isolation for at least a few more weeks. It's more bad news for Kiwis stuck overseas, but there is some hope on the horizon. When the booking system eventually reopens, the government's promising a fairer model. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
Martin Newell is a New Zealander in Hong Kong. He represents a group called Grounded Kiwis, expats who desperately want to come home but can't.
You've always got the laptop on, you've always kind of got one eye on MIQ to know whether you can find a room. It's not just hopeless, it's actually upsetting.
And it just got more so. Last week, the government put new bookings on hold while it grappled to get the country's Delta outbreak under control. The pause was initially advertised as a few days. Today, that became a few weeks.
It's unavoidable that for now we have had to extend the pause on releasing any further MIQ vouchers for a few more weeks to ease pressure on the system.
That's because the country's quarantine facilities are near bursting, packed full with people who've caught COVID-19 in Auckland. 2 managed isolation hotels have been converted to join the jet park, meaning more rooms for those with the virus, but fewer for people coming into the country. Chris Hipkins says the Crown Plaza Hotel is also out of action, while a full review is conducted into how Delta escaped in the first place.
That is one of the reasons why we're asking Kiwis abroad to play their part in this response by being patient. I acknowledge that that is a very challenging thing to ask of them.
He says people can still apply in the case of emergencies, but those thinking of a short-term trip are advised to put their plans on hold.
People do have to adjust their expectations a little bit at the moment. Now is not a good time to come home for a holiday with the intention of returning back to where you are. People need to be realistic about that.
Martin Newell says that is a slap in the face, particularly for the many people who've had their emergency applications turned down.
We're not talking about people that want to just come home for a holiday for Christmas. There's people that need to come home because they've lost their job, because their loved ones are sick, because they need medical treatment. It's not just people wanting to come home for a holiday.
Both National and ACT say the government has created the problem for itself, ignoring their proposals for purpose-built or private MIQ facilities, which could have coped with the demand.
We've just been dismissed by this government for raising such propositions.
I just don't know why they won't listen to the advice that they're given.
On one point at least, the government has heard the criticism and listened. Mr Hipkins says when the MIQ booking website eventually reopens, it'll operate in a new way. The public will be informed ahead of a large tranche of rooms being released, and the spots will then be allocated in a type of lottery.
It will mean that people can be selected from the queue randomly, removing the need for people to be the fastest person to hit the button.
Until we actually see how it works in practice, it's very hard to know if it's going to improve things.
New rooms are expected to open up before the end of the year, but if demand stays as it is, don't bank on being home for Christmas.
While some MIQ group bookings are being culled, including spots reserved for seasonal workers, you know, the people who pick, pack and prune and look after the stuff we like to eat and export. Well, joining me now is Yummy Fruits General Manager Paul Painter. Paul, when did you find out that RSE workers, would be culled from MIQ spots?
Well, the Prime Minister announced a month or so ago that they weren't going to have to go through MIQ anyway in the fullness of time, and I think that starts about now. So it was just the last flight of people who were going through MIQ. The fact that they were going through MIQ has always been a travesty because our guys come from Samoa and they've never had a case. They shut their borders before we did. Based on the measles pandemic a couple of years ago and almost getting wiped out in 1918. So they know the risks and they shut their border down. So to take those people from a COVID-free country and put them into the only place in New Zealand where we know we've got COVID has been a crazy idea for the last year.
Okay, so there's two issues here, and we're going to get to the one-way bubble in a second. But in terms of the MIQ bookings, how many were on the flight coming in that were going to have to go through MIQ?
Oh, I don't know. Basically, the industry was asked to delay their arrival so that they could meet the one-way bubble date. So, and the industry is very happy to do that because it probably cost them about $7,000 a person to actually get them into the field. So if they can avoid that cost, they're wildly enthusiastic.
Are you still going to get them though?
We don't know. The Prime Minister's announcement was really welcome, but since then we've had no further information. So no confirmation of an approval to recruit from employers and no advice of numbers. So we've had our application for perhaps 2.5 months for 40 or 60 workers in the new year, and we haven't heard anything yet.
Okay, so when do you need them by?
Well, we need some for the thinning season for stone fruit and apples, which is basically starts about now and goes through to Christmas time. So there are 81 in the Bay of Plenty working in the kiwi fruit industry, which were working for us and went up there for kiwi fruit and will come back to us. So that's now been approved, but the normal number we have is in the 140s. So we don't know what's going to happen with the balance.
So the region itself, in total, how many of these workers do you reckon are still needed?
Well, we need seasonally in the vegetable and the apple and the stone fruit and the grape industry about 10,000 seasonal workers. And the crisis we're facing is for our industry, for our business, about a third have been RSEs, a third Kiwis and a third backpackers. So the problem isn't the RSEs, it's the fact that over the last 2 or 3 years, the backpackers and the Kiwis have almost 100% dried up. The latest household labour force survey showed that Hawke's Bay unemployment for the June quarter was 3.2%, which is full employment by any standard, and I don't think it's ever been this low in my lifetime. And it's contrary to the predictions of double-digit unemployment that we were looking at 12 months ago. So everybody's surprised that there are no workers, but we're sure missing those backpackers and other short-term visa holders.
Right, because Paul, the government would say, I imagine, in response to that a couple of months ago they extended people who were here on holiday visas, about 10,000 of them. So are you not benefiting from those extra people floating around needing work?
Well, I don't think it's 10,000. We normally have about 130 backpackers at any given time. This year we had about 5. Quite a lot of them went home beforehand. I mean, in the summer it's 50-odd thousand people. And indeed the number of people in New Zealand in a normal peak season, say March, with a short-term working visa of some sort is about 300,000. So a lot of people, most of which are now no longer in the country.
So you would appreciate the scenario at the moment. Basically, the border's locked down tight. Not even Australia gets quarantine-free travel. What are you looking for from the government now? Are you seeking an assurance that this one-way bubble involving your RSE workers will still be allowed to go ahead?
Well, we're in a disaster situation, and the absence of Kiwis and backpackers means we're absolutely reliant on the backpackers. If we go back to normal numbers, I still think it'll be half the number of people we need, and we've got a huge crisis on our hands. If we don't get the RSEs, a lot of people will be looking down the barrel of going out of business next year. It's as simple as that. And
the produce, what happens to that then?
Oh, it'll fall on the ground. I mean, our industry is worth about $900 million. In export earnings, and it will be easy to lose $100 or $200 or $300 million worth of that. And coming out of the back of COVID, that's something we can't afford to do.
Is it potentially going to be worse than last year?
Well, it looks like it's very likely to be worse than last year. Last year we did have a few backpackers still, and also Kiwis. I mean, we've seen the unemployment rate drop here significantly over the last 12 months, to our surprise.
Appreciate your time this evening. That is Paul Painter, who's from Yummy Fruits, the General Manager there in Hawke's Bay. Homai o whakaro, we'd love your feedback. Nō reira anei na kaupapa mo te hōtaka nei. First thing, MIQ, the freeze has been extended, but there's going to be a virtual lobby when it starts up again, where basically you get into the lobby and then there's a lottery and some people get a space. What do you reckon? Is that fair? Is that a better version of MIQ? And also your thoughts on the RSE workers and whether they should still be able to come with a one-way quarantine-free bubble into the country to work here in our orchards. Pātui mai, text me on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is 24 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarongo mai, e haere aki nei. Coming up on the program, the COVID Response Minister, Chris Hipkins, is live. Puppy returns and family births are among the invalid reasons that have been given for crossing Auckland's southern border today. With Auckland and Northland at alert level 4 and the rest of the country at 3, a police checkpoint's been set up at Mercer. Aucklanders can't head south unless they have documents proving they're allowed to travel. As reporter Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe discovered, some motorists' day was over before it got started.
Just starting work today? Finishing?
Yeah, just starting work today. Heading to Hamilton.
It's September. Right, cool. You have a good day?
Yeah, thank you, officer.
Thank you.
Another day of level 4 lockdown in Auckland, and with it the return of a familiar sight at the southern border. The police checkpoints are back. Road cones force commuters off State Highway 1 at Mercer and onto the overramp above. It's just after 6 a.m. Police officers wave motorists down the line. They come to a stop before being quizzed. Traffic is at a trickle, with no more than several dozen cars passing as we approach 7:30.
I'm standing on the Mercer overbridge at the main border south of Auckland. Now, there have been about 50 cars come through here this morning, a pretty quiet trickle. There are about 10 officers stationed on the bridge itself. Most people have been getting through without any issues, bar a couple who have been turned away.
Two gents in a silver sedan pull up to the checkpoint. They have a pet problem, telling officers they're in possession of a puppy, which they're trying to return to someone south of the border.
The only way you can do that is ask him to come in. Yeah, be up here. Yeah. Okay, I'll give him a call. Yeah, you have to. Yep. Well, you have to go back down and park in the car park over there. Yeah. And then give him a call down there. Okay. All right? Okay.
They have a puppy, but not the right papers, so Pooch's trip south ends near the Mercer McDonald's car park. Another vehicle pulls up. The driver's son is expecting a child, but a sympathetic officer says that doesn't cut the mustard either.
You'll have to FaceTime and things like that to see each other through your phones and things like that, because that's our only way we can do it, and I'm really sorry, but that's unfortunately how we have to be. Yeah, so I'm sorry. I know that my friend's grandmother died the other day in hospital and they can't do anything about it, and it's just it's what we have to sacrifice right now just so that we can clear it, make sure the country gets clean of this COVID-19, okay? So I'm sorry, you'll just have to pull off to this side. Okay.
Soon after, a van loaded with 4 men is ushered out of the queue to the side of the road. These chaps say they're cleaners heading to Cambridge for a job at a takeaway restaurant. But they don't have the right papers. Will they be allowed through? Let's listen in as officers deliberate.
Because they're not in uniform or anything like that either. But
no, I mean, health's not essential. Cleaning, yes, but this isn't for an essential service. They need to have the documentation, like you said, with their individual names on it. So yeah, no. Sweet. They're going to have to turn around.
It's bad news for these boys. Their workday ends here.
So everyone has to have approval of that, and then you'll be allowed to come through. So you won't be able to cross today, sorry.
Yeah, it's all good.
Sweet.
So it's back to the office for a cuppa.
A bit frustrating, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
Just trying to get a word. What did she say that? What do you guys have to go back and do now?
I don't know. But we're going to head back to the office and have a chat with them and maybe get some new documents.
About 3,500 businesses have been given exemptions to pass through the checkpoints, and most here at Mercer are given the all clear.
I actually live in the area, so I'm not actually going over the boundaries, but no, I thought I'd give it a go today and see how smoothly it went, and it's been brilliant.
Yeah, so we're going back to Hamilton. I came through at 5:30 this morning, just with some aircraft on ground parts.
Down to Hamilton, yeah, for work.
Work?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this will be it for the next few days?
Yeah, just today and tomorrow this week, just doing a couple of days, just when required, yeah.
While most get the green light at Mercer, some are sent back to the COVID red zone, either to sort out paperwork or stay put.
It is 29 minutes past 5, and if you were listening to that on radio, we'll put that piece from our two Nicks up on our Facebook page so you can check out the video. Kia amo tonu mai, you're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. A former Air New Zealand flight attendant who's now at the front lines of Auckland's COVID vaccination rollout says it's not a career change she ever anticipated, but one she couldn't be more proud of. Coral Davies was made redundant last year and despite being terrified of needles, has ended up as the supervisor of Albany's vaccination clinic. Now she treats every patient as if they're stepping into business class. She spoke to our reporter, Nita Blake-Person.
Kia ora everyone, I'm Coral Davies and I have been a flight service manager, cabin crew, flight attendant, whatever you may call it, and then leadership roles within Air New Zealand for 1 month shy of 33 years.
Coral Davies sounds remarkably upbeat when she's talking about the end of her Air New Zealand career. While a COVID-related redundancy isn't how she would have chosen to leave the industry, looking back, she says it gave her time to reflect and see what she wanted to do next. After working at an electoral booth in October, then supervising NCEA exams, she decided retirement wasn't for her.
And I thought I want to do something within the community, something close to home, something that I felt I truly believed in and added value. And so I applied to the DHB to work in the vaccination sites.
That's landed her at the Albany Vaccination Centre, where Coral works as a supervisor, welcoming people, answering questions, making sure they have everything they need and that the clinic runs smoothly. Despite not liking needles, it's a job she absolutely loves.
You know, that whole customer journey of making sure it's a great experience for people, connecting with them, learning their stories. On Sunday, a family came in for their vaccines and I said, how's your day going? And the daughter was 17 and she said, well, Mum and I blow-dried and curled our hair today to come out. So it had become an event and I said, well, you're making history today. And they said, and that's exactly it. That's why we dressed up for this moment. You know, that makes my heart sing. That makes me feel like I've got a part in other people's stories as well.
She's not the only ex-Air New Zealander there. Former flight crew and baggage handlers have also found new jobs using their carefully honed customer care skills.
And I did say to somebody one day, gosh, it's a great job. It's like being on an aircraft without the aeroplane. And it's great to see people walk out going, wow, that was amazing, when actually they've come in to have a needle put in their arm, quite frankly.
That care and enthusiasm has spread this week. Coral's daughter Emily visited the clinic to get her own vaccination and fired off this message to Twitter.
Mum was made redundant after 33 years with Air New Zealand last year, and yesterday I got to see her thriving in her new role as a supervisor at a vaccination centre. She treats every person coming in for a vaccine like they're stepping into business class. It's fabulous.
The tweet has become a bright spot in an online world which can look pretty bleak right now. At last count, it had 19,000 likes.
Overwhelmed, but also excited. We should be treating people like they're stepping into business class, quite frankly. Every person that steps into a vaccination site for their vaccine is actually doing something to keep all of us safe. And so from my mind, they deserve us to treat them like they are royalty coming into the site, and they deserve a lot of respect and a lot of care when they come in.
Among those who's given the tweet a like is her new big boss, the Director General of Health, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield.
It was really exciting, I have to say, because, you know, we watch him every day, we listen to what he has to say. He's a man with a huge wealth of experience, and so I felt quite proud.
Coral says she's just one part of a big team making the vaccination rollout happen, and for anyone who's facing a similar fork in their career road, she has this advice.
It may not be where you thought you were going to go in the first place, but it could be just as great and just as much fun.
A COVID pivot with purpose that's helping keep Aotearoa safe.
Kia ora e te iwi e haere aki nei i a checkpoint. West Auckland residents begin trawling through the wreckage left behind by the floods. Fast food queues bring Masterton traffic to a halt. And 3 million swabs have gone up people's noses. The pressure of turning those tests around alongside other more important lab work. Homai o whakaroa. Don't forget you can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or Facebook us or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time now for the headlines with Sarah.
Kia ora, Lisa. RNZ News headlines. Ko Sarah Thompson tōku ingoa. Auckland's hospitals are asking others around the country to send intensive care nurses to help them. The call-out went out last night after the number of people in ICU across the region reached 8, with 3 of them on ventilators. Kate Weston from the Nurses Organisation told Checkpoint there has been a lot of pressure on the nursing workforce to go into this outbreak and there is not much left in the tank. She says there has been chronic understaffing across the country with shortages in critical care. The government is deferring some large bookings of seasonal workers due to arrive this month as MIQ capacity strains. The 2 managed isolation hotels are now being used to quarantine people who've caught COVID-19 in Auckland, as Jet Park alone was not big enough. New applications for spots in MIQ have been put on hold for several weeks. A Kiwi Rail locomotive and 2 train wagons have ended up in Picton Harbour this afternoon. The Port Marlborough Chief Executive, Rhys Welburn, says they are still trying to determine the details around what happened. Mr Welburn says no one was hurt and he believes the engine and wagons were remotely operated. The Director General of Health says the latest modelling shows that Delta outbreak cases are declining overall despite a spike today. The R value, or reproductive number, needs to be below 1. If it's above 1, then the virus is spreading. Ashley Bloomfield says there's a 90% probability it remains under 1. There are 75 new cases of COVID-19 in the community today. The British government has confirmed officials have begun talks with senior Taliban representatives in Doha about securing safe passage out of Afghanistan for British nationals and Afghans who have worked with the United Kingdom. It is also sending extra staff to neighbouring countries to help people trying to flee. And finally, New Zealand's oldest person, Ron Hermans, a Royal New Zealand Air Force war veteran, has died in Christchurch. He was 109, just 3 weeks from his 110th birthday. Those are your headlines. Our next news and sport update is at 6.
Thanks, Sarah. No mai, hoki mai. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku hoa I nāianei, ko Nicholas Poynton, who's in our Auckland newsroom to talk business. Nicholas, the retail spending hit this lockdown versus a year ago. Have you got some figures?
Yeah, we've got a bit of a breakdown here. Both the BNZ Bank and Kiwi Bank have crunched the numbers and tallied how much was spent during the first week of this lockdown using electronic cards versus a year ago. And as you'd expect, the resumption of restrictions has put a big dent in consumer spending, but interestingly, not as much as last year. For BNZ card transactions, they were down 40% during the first week of lockdown, but that compares with a near 60% decline a year ago. Similar thing for Kiwi Bank, spending declined 20% versus 45% a year ago. Kiwi Bank's chief economist Jared Kerr, he says consumers and retailers are just much better prepared for the second lockdown. He says spending has been digitised or deferred, but importantly, it has not been destroyed. And these figures ultimately just reaffirm what we saw in the latest consumer confidence survey that was out last week. It suggests that consumers remain optimistic. This is not their first rodeo when it comes to lockdowns, and they know that for the most part that they all feel quite secure in their jobs and are buoyed by the fact that the labour market is quite tight and it's really favouring job seekers. And you're probably interested to know what people are actually spending their money on. Well, it turns out to be the 3 Bs: beer, bread, and I can't believe this, but broccoli. But last time I made a foray into the supermarket, they're about $4 each. So I guess it is quite positive to hear that people are forking out for the greens this lockdown. But look, that takes me to the markets. It closed up 25 points to 13,243. The dollar is trading at 70.4 US cents and 96.2 Australian.
Thanks, Nicholas. And yum, broccoli. Yeah, right up there with beer. Ruined cars, sodden belongings and ripped up gardens, West Aucklanders have been taking stock of what they lost in Monday night's deluge. Bethel's Beach remains cut off because of a washed out section of the road. Our reporter Katie Todd checked in with some in the flooded areas.
It's filthy. It's like boggy, slimy. Everything is like silty, muddy, silty, slippery. Yeah, it's revolting.
That's Taupaki resident Sharon describing the mess left behind after Monday night's drenching. It's an inland community, yet she woke up to waves lapping at her front deck and even saw a carp swimming past. While her house survived, she's been counting the losses in her garage and front yard.
My car's been written off and the truck won't work either. Dave's got works from home, big garage, everything's ruined.
Despite alert level 4 restrictions, some residents have managed to find a helping hand for the clean-up. Mike Lockton is among the half-dozen members of a Taupaki MadFit boot camp who leapt into action when they heard about the damage to their trainer's house.
So we've just come to pitch in and just help clean up around the yard for Ben and Jamie, just to help them, make things safe for them and their young family.
What's the damage? What do you have?
So fences completely bowled over. I mean, obviously there was 1.5 meters of water here, so lots of the things in the shed have been destroyed. The back garage, which is a sleep out, a lot of the furniture in there has been destroyed. So it's just going through and just trying to get out what we can and salvage what we can, and what we can't is going in the skip.
COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins has clarified it's okay to get a hand for urgent work, as long as people follow public health measures, keep track of who they're with, and don't gather in large groups. Tradies can work too.
Under Alert Level 4, plumbers, electricians, locksmiths and other tradespeople can carry out work that is required to address immediate risks to health and safety, as long as they are continuing to follow public health measures and they're wearing appropriate PPE.
But some of those tradies who'd like to be helping are themselves caught up in the flooding. In Huapai, water tank cleaning owner Daniel Bott was trying unsuccessfully to start his work van. It's one of 3 cars on the driveway which was submerged, along with his work shed.
Nothing will start. Total severe flood damage. We can't, the flood also got my tool shed, which has taken out all of my electrical gear, so my livelihood and stuff like that.
In true Level 4 style, Kumiu gym owner Cassie Keegan says she was watching remotely from home when the floodwaters swallowed up dozens of exercise machines. Today, she was hauling spin bikes off the sodden gym floor.
My husband Rob had some text messages to say that there'd been flooding out in Kumiu, so he hopped on our cameras, and those ones had stopped working because the drive was covered in water, but we could see in here that the water was about half deep.
She says the water was contaminated and expects very little will be salvageable.
Our septic is out here, so everything that's come in is covered in septic as well.
Auckland councils had response teams out assessing the damage today. It says there will be at least 2 groups of people in emergency accommodation tonight, while others are bunking down with friends and family. 2 civil defence centres at 6 Henderson Valley and the Kumiu Community Centre will be open until 6 o'clock tonight.
Traffic was brought to a standstill in parts of Wairarapa today as people got their takeaway fix. Hospitality businesses large and small are back offering contactless service for the first day of Level 3. Our reporter Jake McKee and cameraman Samuel Rilstone spent the day in the region.
Could I have a Sprite and a Coke, please?
Yeah, anything else?
No, that's it, thank you.
21, please drive on down.
The roads in Wairarapa are busy. Even McDonald's is busy. And Burger King is too.
I'm having a wrap and chips, and the kids are having cheeseburgers and chicken burgers.
A mate's race hunger buster for myself, and hotcakes.
Some nuggets, hopefully, burger, chips, drink.
Just about anything, really.
Lines for fast food flowed onto the streets in Masterton. One woman telling us she'd called the police as it was blocking traffic at a central roundabout. It's something McDonald's Masterton owner Andre Dupré was expecting after having to involve police for traffic management during Level 3 last year. But he's glad to be open for multiple reasons.
The staff get bored at home. People are just sitting there. I mean, how much Netflix can you actually watch? And just to see them again smiling and happy and back at work and doing something is actually also very good and a very important factor in opening up again.
And while Mr Dupré says operating at Level 3 is easy, he'd rather see the Wairarapa region at Level 2.
I think the Wairarapa is a bubble within a bubble. And because of that, we should be at Level 2 sooner. I think our integrity of this virus is very good in keeping it out. And I'd like to see us in Level 2, not just for us, but for my other colleagues in business.
It's a different story at Kāinga Eatery, which only opened 3 months ago in the nearby town of Carterton. The car park outside was almost full, but owner Shelley Rutene says only a few customers have come her way. Most are going to the supermarket. Ms Rutene is happy about being at level 3 in a personal sense and for everybody's safety.
Obviously, in a business sense, this isn't great in terms of being able to, sustain this.
She thought about not opening at level 3, but got advice from other business owners.
Another reason to open was for my staff to reconnect again with each other, and that was it was important for me to do that.
On the streets of Masterton, the move to level 3 is insignificant for most people. Some are content, but others are keen for a move to level 2, if it's safe.
We're sort of just doing the same old, same old.
I would like to. It's getting warmer now. It'd be nice to just get out of the house.
I'm happy if we wait for another week to be in level 3. Any longer would probably affect the businesses quite a lot. And if there's no cases in the region, I don't see why we shouldn't do that.
But for most people, getting out of the house to pick up a bite was enough.
I'm just hungry. I couldn't be bothered making a feed.
A taste of freedom to come.
Takeaways. If you were listening to that on radio, we'll put the video up online on our Facebook page. It is 6:15. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. And Muriaki na Pita Pita Kōrero. After the news at 6, COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins joins us live as hospitals struggle with the pressure of COVID and MIQ spots are pulled. Some families in Auckland are waiting days for food parcels because of unprecedented demand. Social service providers say they're dealing with a food crisis that's getting worse. But in South Auckland, they're also seeing the community rally like never before. Jamie Tahana reports.
David Letele's Brown Butterbean Food Bank has been run off its feet. They've been here before, but this time seems different.
This one definitely seems, it's a lot harder for families, especially for the people that we deal with are already living, never mind paycheck to paycheck, it's day to day. So something like this just really throws a spanner in the works. People are just tired, though,
The Southside suburbs and their communities are bearing the brunt of this COVID outbreak. More than 1,300 families have been forced to isolate. Work has suddenly stopped, and there are large families in small homes running out of food. Mr. Letele says a single Facebook post last week garnered more than 200 emails asking for help.
Today we're putting together about 400 parcels. That'll go out tomorrow, and then tomorrow we begin the same again. There is a backlog, but we do our best to make sure that everyone gets their meal parcels by the end of the week.
Those delays are being seen elsewhere too. Rufo Pupuali'i is with the social agency Emerge Aotearoa. She says things are getting tough for many.
They ask for food parcels to be delivered or to be picked up straight away, but because of the demands of the community out there, they wait for 3 days or even a week, which is not possible because these are basic needs.
And some are concerned the demand they're seeing could be just the tip of the iceberg. Reverend Jonathan Lefali Pauli's phone has been ringing non-stop. Parishioners wondering where to go.
Most of them, particularly the elderly people, they don't have access to Wi-Fi and that, or even if they do, they find it difficult when they try and access information. There are some churches who are pulling together their own resources, trying to help out.
In a statement, Social Development Minister Carmel Cipollone acknowledges there are some supply issues, but says she's keeping a close eye on demand. An extra $7 million for food security has just been announced, she says, and there could be more. She says whānau who need support should contact the Ministry of Social Development or the COVID-19 website. Rufo Pupuali'i says that can be easier said than done. There are language barriers, pride and whakamā, and many of the poorest don't have internet.
They don't know where to go. Information needs to come to using the Pacifica language media, and especially for our families who don't have internet. Information and phone calls, all the numbers that needs to be out there for the people who are missed out.
Malia Tuai is a community advocate with the Red Cross, helping families and translating information. She says she's seeing demand like never before, but she's also seeing a community rallying like no other.
South Auckland does kind of come together and just kind of help each other, and we've seen that. We've seen all these providers working hard to make sure that no family goes without. However, we know that there are some who have slipped through the gaps.
David Letele says he's seen a flood of locals and businesses looking to volunteer or donate. He's just had 13 pallets of potatoes dropped off.
Man, we're just here, as long as we have to be.
In the wee smalls of the morning, in a quiet lab somewhere, the 3 millionth COVID nose swab was processed with little fanfare or fuss. This Delta community outbreak has seen a massive surge in COVID tests, with a rolling 7-day average of more than 27,500. Lab scientists have been racing to process them, and today they got a socially distanced backslap from the DG of Health, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield.
I'd like to give a shout out to all the workers in our diagnostic medical labs throughout Aotearoa. Yesterday they processed their 3 millionth nasopharyngeal COVID-19 PCR test since the start of the pandemic, an amazing achievement and absolutely fundamental to the success of New Zealand's elimination strategy to date.
Well, joining me now is Terry Taylor, President of the New Zealand Institute of Medical Laboratory Science. Evening, Terry. That's a pretty monumental milestone, isn't it?
Yeah, kia ora, Lisa. Yes, it is, and I think it's a credit to this amazing group of probably undervalued health professionals, to be honest. But look, to be honest, we have always been ready for this challenge. We're one of the few groups that I think have actually been ready to go for these sort of events. We've done a lot of work in the background. We've trained our staff. We've been able to move staff from other departments and whatnot to prepare ourselves for these surge events. But it is a monumental achievement. You are dead right.
So when you say you're ready, what does that look like? I mean, are you guys working around the clock 24/7 or how does it work?
Yeah, pretty much in some of the busier laboratories in New Zealand, that's 100% the case, Lisa. Now, our clock really starts ticking when those public health nurses take the swabs and they end up in the laboratory. And then we have an amazing team of people that register the samples, that sit there and process them in the biohazard cabinets, pull them together, get them all prepared, whacked on the instruments, and hopefully the results through in a good time, which, it can be challenging when you get 10,000 swabs dumped on your desk.
Is there a goal? Is there a target for the time for the turnaround, Terry?
Look, to be honest, we really do try our best to get things through within that 48, 72-hour period. But as you're aware, with the amazing surge response in Auckland in particular, we've seen labs all over New Zealand pick up some of the slack from Auckland, so occasionally there'll be some travel time put into that as well. But we're trying our best, and we do prioritise this. I need to make that clear. We prioritise the close contacts, the really sick people. They get through first.
How long can you sustain this kind of pace with the resources you've got and the people you've got?
Oh, look, goodness, it's not easy, and it's a reoccurring theme in the health system. It's not easy. It's mentally and physically demanding on our profession. There is no two ways about it. But look, we're up for this challenge. It's a real chance for us to really show the people of New Zealand just what an amazing profession medical laboratory science is.
So, just walk me through some of this, right, Terry? When someone's finished at work, and I imagine them all there with their PPE and their lab coat and all the rest of it in their little cubicle, so what happens when they head home and want to mix with the family? Is there a routine that they go through to sort of, decontaminate, for want of a better word?
Look, I think just be aware that our laboratories are probably the most controlled environments in New Zealand. Most of our rooms have negative pressure. They're working in cabinets, all of the staff. We have the most amazing quality assurance procedures and also quality and safety. I mean, it's just part of our bread and butter as being a scientist. So the risk is actually very minimal. It's more a perceived risk than an actual risk. That's how I would term it.
Yeah, so the Delta outbreak, how does it compare in terms of the work that you all are doing with the earlier outbreaks we had in terms of demand and pressures?
Oh, look, the figures speak for themselves, but in saying that, our technology has changed in that 18 months. We've certainly changed a lot in that period, but goodness me, we're on a normal day in New Zealand, normal screening we may do 5,000, 6,000 swabs. Now we're doing up to 40,000, so that probably says it all, really.
Would it take some pressure off you if we were using rapid home tests to screen people before they go for a nasal swab further down the track?
Certainly not in a surge testing, because we're actually looking at the diagnostic test here, not a surveillance test. So not to mix the two of them up, but the nasal swab is what's known as a diagnostic. In other words, it's telling you yes or no you've got COVID. Whereas a surveillance test is more a test just to see how it's sitting in the community, and they tend to lack the sensitivity and the specificity of other tests. But don't get me wrong here, in the future they will certainly become more and more prevalent as we move forward, because things are changing pretty quickly, as you can tell.
Terry, what happens with all the other tests? Because, you know, COVID's not the only health issue that people are facing. So did you learn any lessons from previous outbreaks in terms of other tests?
Yeah, 100%, and a very good question. Yes, we did. We not demand, but we'd like people, when they are sick and there's things wrong, please contact your primary health provider as well. We're still there to do all of the rest of the testing. We're still doing all the acute work as well. We're doing all of our cancer surveillance still goes on during these periods. So we've got to encourage people, don't sit at home stewing on things. Get out there. We're still there doing that work.
So superheroes wear white lab coats, not just capes then, Terry.
Yeah, but we don't get changed in phone boxes either, so just be aware of that.
Brilliant to talk to you. Thanks for your time. That is Terry Taylor, who's the president of the New Zealand Institute of Medical Laboratory Science. Carloads of people queued up at Auckland's first drive-through vaccination site at a marae today, an initiative many hope will boost low vaccination rates among Māori. It comes as Labour's Māori MPs fronted up at select committees this morning and accepted the government's pandemic response could have served tangata whenua better. Te Aniwa Hurahanginui has the story.
Do you have a space for 20 in a euro? You do?
15-year-old Te Rangiura Royal is masked up and ready to go. The King's College student joined queues of cars at Papakura Marai's drive-through vaccination site today, a little on edge to be among the first young teens in the country to be vaccinated, with 12 to 15-year-olds now eligible.
Nervous, I don't want it to hurt.
I'm more nervous he's going to faint on camera, and I just thought of all the children to faint, it would probably be my child.
Te Rangiura was joined by his mum, Māori GP Matire Harwood. The pair could have been vaccinated at any number of vaccine sites in South Auckland, but they specifically wanted it done at a place they feel most at home.
We were invited to go to the vaccine centre at the airport over the weekend, and I talked to him about it, but he said, no Mum, I want to do it in my own community. So that's why we came here.
Papakura Marae CEO Tony Kake says that's why vaccination sites at Marae are so vital.
Our whānau Māori have trust and confidence in our marae, and I kind of say that in a little bit of a gloating way, but that's a fact. And we really want to encourage our whānau Māori to get out to any of the vaccination centres, not only here at Papakura Marae, but anywhere across the nation.
It's a message Labour's Māori MPs are driving home too, after coming under increasing pressure to get Māori vaccination rates up. Willie Jackson accepts the government's pandemic response could be improved in areas for his people, but changes are being made, including a new online portal on the Te Puni Kōkiri website where Māori can get important information about vaccines in one place.
And all that information goes out at 1 o'clock every day when the Prime Minister is talking, so that our people will know what the vaccination rates are, will know which marae to go to.
Back at the Papakura Marae, things are going smoothly. Tony Kake finding the process easy as.
First of all, you line up outside on the road there, you get the big kia ora, welcome. And they do a quick screen, just get your NHI number, get your details. From there, come on through to our vaccination, get a jab. We do left arms and right arms, so it's all good. Whatever window is free, we'll put one in.
Vaccination Program Director Matt Hannant from the Northern Region Health Coordination Centre says it could be the first of many marae drive-thrus across Auckland.
We're absolutely exploring that. We're having all sorts of conversations with lots of different providers. The drive-through model is proving really popular with the community. So we've done over 40,000 people through the drive-thrus that we have at the airport and at the Trust Arena.
The Papakura Marae drive-thru will be open for vaccinations from 9 to 4 every weekday, and there's no need to book. The 35 staff working there hope to vaccinate 500 people a day.
Well, let's get to your feedback. The whole idea of frozen MIQ spaces has got you on the text and the email. Kathy says, why are there always unlimited spots for travelling sports teams and support crew, for example, 2 cricket teams currently overseas? Why hasn't sports travel been put on pause to allow the sick and New Zealanders who have run out of money to return home? This doesn't make any sense, says Kathy. Sarah's got in touch to say dumb idea of the week. Why can't we charter 1 or 2 currently mothballed cruise ships, park them out in Auckland Harbour and make them floating MIQ facilities? Total isolation, but close to Auckland amenities. Another person says a lottery system will not filter out those people who want to come on holiday from those who have medical reasons or family reasons to come home. Yeah, true.
Ahiahi Mārie, RNZ News at 6, ko Sarah Thompson tōku ingoa. A union says a call for nurses to go to Auckland to help hospitals with the COVID outbreak shows the huge pressure the health system is under. Nurses from around the country, particularly intensive care specialists, have been invited to help in the city. The nurses' organisation, Kate Weston, says nurses have already been extremely busy carrying out vaccinations and COVID tests and have come into the outbreak with not much in the tank.
We've been through winter, we've had the RSV, and unfortunately we know that there's been some very chronic understaffing issues across Aotearoa.
The Director General of Health says nurses from around the country are already responding to the request.
That includes a number of additional staff to help the frontline response in hospitals, as well as in the new quarantine facilities that are being stood up. There includes nursing staff in the hospitals, healthcare assistants and ICU specialist nurses as well.
There are 32 people in hospital and 8 in ICU, with 3 requiring ventilators. A New Zealander representing a group of Kiwi expats desperate to come home says the extension of a pause on border MIQ applications is devastating. The government has moved to stop taking new bookings for managed isolation for at least a few more weeks to help officials safely house the growing number of people with COVID-19. Martin Newell, who lives in Hong Kong and represents a group called Grounded Kiwis, says it's incorrect to say anyone wanting to return home wants to have a holiday.
We're not talking about people that want to just come home for a holiday for Christmas. There's people that need to come home because they've lost their job, because their loved ones are sick, because they need medical treatment. It's not just people wanting to come home for a holiday.
The pause on applications for border MIQ does not apply to emergency allocations. More than half of the eligible population has now had at least 1 dose of the Pfizer vaccine. COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins says as of last night, 3.5 million doses have been administered. He says 2,290,000 people have had at least 1 dose, about 54% of the eligible population aged 12 years and over. One focus now, says Mr Hipkins, is boosting Māori and Pasifika vaccinations.
That suggests that we still have an ethnicity challenge, although I want to acknowledge that for both of those communities the age profile is younger, so they would have been underrepresented in some of the older age groups.
Chris Hipkins says older New Zealanders were first to be offered a vaccine within the general population and have good rates, with about 85% of those over 65 having had at least 1 dose. Victoria's lockdown will be extended until about September 23rd. The state recorded 120 new locally acquired COVID cases today, the first time it's been triple digits since last September. Premier Daniel Andrews says the case numbers will be going up and the state can't ease restrictions in any profound way. Playgrounds will be open again from Friday, but all other restrictions will remain in place for now. Mr Andrews says it's a very tough and challenging time. The National Party says government must seriously consider moving the South Island down COVID-19 alert levels. Nationals leader Judith Collins says it's understandable the island was initially locked down as the risk of the latest outbreak was assessed. However, she says there must be robust justification to keep South Islanders in high alert levels when there are no community cases in Te Waipōnamu.
I'm calling on Jacinda Ardern to assess the Delta risk in the South Island, to be very sure before she orders continued restrictions. It is incredibly frustrating for people in the South Island who are stuck at home despite being on a separate island.
Judith Collins says the government must take a pragmatic approach to alert levels in the South Island. Family harm reports to police have risen over lockdown. Sam Ollie has the new preliminary figures.
They show the number of reported family harm incidents increased 3.9% in week 1 and 6.2% in week 2. Commissioner Andrew Costa says this is a small increase in comparison to a spike at the start of the first lockdown last year. But he says family incidents are typically underreported, and he encourages anyone experiencing abuse or violence or witnessing it to call 111 or ask a neighbour or passerby to do so for them. Commissioner Costa says it could save a life.
A Kiwi Rail locomotive and 2 train wagons have ended up in Picton Harbour. Port Marlborough's Chief Executive, Rhys Welburn, says they went off the link span, or drawbridge, into the water at 3:30 this afternoon. He believes they were remotely operated and no one was hurt. Mr Welburn does say there does not appear to be much fuel spilt, but they are ensuring there is an appropriate environmental response. The port is trying to retrieve the wagons just now. Moving into sports news, the 5 New Zealand Paralympians will chase medals at the Tokyo Games tonight. Sophie Pascoe will chase a 4th Tokyo Paralympic medal when she lines up in the final of the 200 metres SM9 medley. Pascoe easily won her heat to post the fastest qualifying time. Also chasing medals in the pool tonight are Nikita Howarth, Tupou Neufi and Jessie Reynolds. Sprinter Danielle Aitchison has a gold medal chance in the 100-metre T36 final. The Black Caps go into their opening T20 against Bangladesh in Dhaka tonight as underdogs. The home side are coming off a 4-1 series win over Australia. Meanwhile, the White Ferns hope they can be competitive against the best side in the world when they play England in their T20 series opener against England in Chelmsford tomorrow morning. They're boosted by the return of opener Susie Bates, who missed the series losses to England and Australia last summer due to injury.
They've come off a summer of cricket, we've come off a winter. You know, we're under no illusion that England are the best side in the world at the moment, so we're going to be tested in all 8 games. But we also know that we've got some world-class players that we can compete every game.
And finally, the former Czech football international Jitka Klimkova has been appointed as the Football Ferns' new head coach to take the side through to the 2023 World Cup. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Mike Seawright from Relief Aid. Where trouble goes, he follows. Last time I spoke with him, he was in Syria. Now his team is heading for Afghanistan. Dan Slevin is still watching movies from the confines of his own home. I wonder if the popcorn suppliers are holding out. An Australian satirist and provocateur, John Safran. Once he took on God. Now he's taking on vaping and big tobacco. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Te reo irirangi o Aotearoa, on air, online and on demand. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Rapare Thursday. Northland will see rain tonight with a few heavy falls in the east, cloudy periods and a few showers tomorrow. For Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, cloudy periods and a few showers but mainly dry about Auckland City. For Waikato to Wellington, including Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country, also Wairarapa, fine apart from a few cloudy areas. For Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mostly cloudy with a few showers, clearing to become fine in Hawke's Bay tomorrow morning. Buller, Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine, with a few showers about the ranges tomorrow. For Otago and Southland, mainly fine, but some brief rain overnight. For Westland and Fiordland, rain or showers spreading into Fiordland tonight and Westland tonight, then gradually clearing tomorrow. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with a few light showers. That concludes the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Rapare Thursday. It's 8 minutes past 6.
Kia ora rā, e ho, nau mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. SOS, Auckland DHBs are struggling with the growing number of Delta cases while still caring for other high-need patients. The DG of Health signalled reinforcements are on the way for hospitals caring for 32 Delta patients. 8 are in high dependency or intensive care units, and 3 of them are currently needing help breathing. The call's gone out for intensive care nurses and specialists to redeploy from other parts of the country, with more staff also needed for 2 new quarantine facilities. On top of that, the government's extended the freeze on MIQ spots as the system starts to groan under the pressure of this outbreak. Joining me now is COVID Response Minister Chris Hipkins. Tēnā koe, Minister.
Kia ora.
Is this the first sign that the system is cracking under pressure?
No, not at all. I think it is a sign that the system is under pressure, though, and it's under, of course, a fraction of the pressure as it would be if we were dealing with a full-scale outbreak, which is the thing that we've all worked very hard over the last year and a half to try and avoid.
So the DHBs up here in Auckland, they need 30 ICU nurses. Where are you going to get them from?
I know the DHBs across the country are being as cooperative as they can, and that may include sending people from around the country into Auckland to help out. That's not just for the ICU, it's also for the extra MIQ or the extra quarantine happening in MIQ.
How many in total, Minister?
Well, I don't have the ICU numbers. I know for MIQ that they need about 30 extra nurses from other places to help with the number of people that we've got in quarantine at the moment. And I know that other DHBs are certainly working to try and help facilitate that.
So you're potentially looking at taking 60 nurses from an already strained health system, other areas, and transferring them up to Auckland to plug Auckland's gaps. What happens in those other regions?
I think everybody around the country acknowledges, and everybody in the health system acknowledges, that at the moment Auckland's doing some of the heavy lifting here. We need to support them to be successful in that if we want to avoid this, potentially becoming a bigger outbreak that ends up then spreading around the rest of the country. So I think the whole health system is aware that they're all going to need to chip in a little bit and help out, and that's exactly what's happening. DHBs have contingency plans in place. They will be looking to make sure that they can continue to do all of the things that they still need to do, but they'll also be looking to see how they can support their Auckland counterparts.
Okay, so which DHBs are best placed to help out here?
Look, I don't have a breakdown of where those people are going to come from, but I know that every DHB is looking at how they can contribute.
So were we ready for this Delta outbreak or not? Because it's looking like we weren't.
Oh, no, we're absolutely ready, but, we still have a limited...
But you would have a surge plan already, wouldn't you, Minister, for healthcare, when you knew people would potentially be in ICU and in hospital care for Delta, and the Continual Improvement Committee told you to plan for an aggressive strain. So did you have a plan to plug the healthcare gaps?
Well, and part of that surge plan is to move people around the country where we need to. So if we get an outbreak in a particular area and that puts that part of the health system under pressure, then we do need to be able to move people around. And those are the plans that are being implemented at the moment.
So a DHB document I have says that transferring ICU patients out of Auckland, these are non-Delta patients, is another option. Is that under consideration if you can't get the 60 nurses you need?
Those are decisions for clinicians, so they'll make their decisions about where they can best support people who need ICU care. ICU patients are transferred around the country or between hospitals when particular hospitals come under pressure.
We're at split levels at the moment, though, Minister, so that's another challenge, is it not?
Oh, of course, but, we have to rely on our health professionals. They do this. They deal with people, with infectious diseases and infectious conditions, and they handle those very well. So this is not something that's completely new for the health system. They do manage these kind of situations, and I'm sure that they will do that very professionally.
MIQ resources, you've continued the freeze on the release of vouchers, and you say that you're potentially looking to cull group bookings. So what's going by the wayside? Who's getting canned?
Look, no decisions have been made on that yet. We'll go through and look at whether the bookings, for example, if there are people coming in for particular things that are unlikely to happen because of a level escalation.
You mentioned RSE workers, so how many of them are going to lose spots in MIQ?
So far we've deferred 150 RSE workers. Our plan there is, of course, to try and bring them in without the need for MIQ by working with those three Pacific countries that don't have COVID-19.
Is that still going to happen, Minister?
Because quarantine-free pathway.
Yeah, that was supposed to start in September, right? The one-way quarantine-free bubble for those countries, Tonga, Samoa, Vanuatu. Are you still going to allow that to happen in September?
We are still progressing that. Obviously, with all of these things, there's a limited number of people who can work on these things, and some of the people involved in those conversations are also involved in some of the conversations around dealing with our current outbreak. But we are certainly still progressing those discussions. We still want to provide, as soon as we can, a quarantine-free pathway for those RSE workers.
So just to be clear, will you make the September deadline? Because the promise was made, obviously, to people working in this industry that this would be up and running by September. Will you make September or not, do you think?
I certainly wouldn't guarantee that at the moment. And one of the reasons there, of course, is that some of those workers might be reluctant to come until we've got the situation here completely under control. So we'll keep that under review. We're working as quickly as we can to give people certainty, though.
So what about sports teams? Has anyone written to sports organisations and said that's it, no bulk MIQ bookings anymore?
No, we haven't done that, but we certainly would look at whether the events that sports teams are booked in for, if those events are unlikely to go ahead, then that's something that we would look at.
So are the All Blacks, all the spots that they've got in their back pocket, are they still safe?
Look, like I said, we haven't made any changes there at this point, but we're looking closely at everything as to how we can reduce the pressure on MIQ.
So you're telling Kiwis who would potentially just be coming home for a summer holiday, don't bother, stay away. Is that encroaching on their legal right to return to the country that they are a citizen of?
Oh, there's no question it is.
So what was your advice on that, Minister? Were you told that you could get away with this from a legal point of view?
Well, if I start, the MIQ system itself encroaches on people's rights to travel back to New Zealand, and there's no question about that. The question is whether the restrictions being put in place are justifiable given the level of risk. So every decision that I make as the Minister for COVID-19 response that impinges on people's liberties, and there's no doubt, almost every day at the moment I'm making decisions that impinge on people's liberties. The legal test that I have to weigh that up against is whether those limitations are justified in light of the current health situation that we're dealing with.
And so was your advice that it was justified to stick an extra layer on top of that right to return?
Oh, look,
by freezing the vouchers?
We don't share the specific legal advice that we get. But
why not? People should know why you're making these decisions, Minister, so why shouldn't they be, in the interest of transparency, and your government has said it will be the most transparent government, why can't you share what that advice was?
Well, the only minister under our constitutional arrangements authorised to release legal advice is the Attorney-General. I'm not at liberty to do that. What I can say is I take legal advice before every decision that I take, and I'm very comfortable that if someone were to challenge them, that I would have a sound defence to that.
We noticed that the supermarket sites, which were mentioned at today's press conference, I think is there 40? I think from memory, or the supermarket sites, recent ones that were going up online. They seem to be very recent exposures. We were told that the risk was low. What's the abundance of caution in putting them up?
It's so that people who were there can monitor for symptoms, get tests if they need to. Not all locations are released where the risk profile is very low. My view in the conversations that I had this morning with the team was that we should put them out to be transparent, but with an explanation that the risk is low.
If that's the case, if it's an issue of transparency, why then haven't you put a whole lot of other locations up there, like the Amberley Rest Home, like the Sistema factory and other places of work? If we're going to have full transparency, why not put them all up?
One of the questions is there a public health reason for that? Are there people that need to know that it's a location of interest who don't already know?
But you're saying this one doesn't. So, you're saying low risk, they don't have to isolate, just monitor if they get sick. That's the message to everyone, isn't it? Go get tested if you're feeling unwell.
Well, I guess the difference between then and, say, a rest home or a place of work is that we may not be able to, well, we can't, in the case of a supermarket, contact everybody that was there. In the case of a place of work, we can often contact all of those people without having to disclose the place of work. So we disclose that information where there's a chance or a risk that there could be people who we haven't been able to get hold of, or where there is a higher degree of risk.
Just one thing before you go, Minister. We've had an email from a listener who would like you to announce each day how many of the people in hospital are vaccinated so that, it will encourage people to get vaccination. Is that a possibility?
Certainly we do collect some vaccination information. I haven't got the latest numbers. In terms of the overall outbreak that we're dealing with at the moment, a very low percentage of them are fully vaccinated, or even, and there's a few more who've had one dose of the vaccine, but I'm sure in terms of hospitalisations we could see if we can provide that information. I'm happy to follow that up.
Thanks for your time this evening. That is the COVID Response Minister, Chris Hipkins. It is 18 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Reluctant cooks and coffee fans across the South Island are embracing the shift to level 3 and return of their favourite takeaways. Hamburgers, lattes, chips and croissants were all on the menu as people sought a meal they didn't have to prepare themselves. Tess Brunton has more.
South Islanders can finally put down their baking trays and leave it to the professionals after 2 weeks in lockdown. In Dunedin, the Perk Cafe owner Sarah Hussey braved a frosty morning to help caffeinate the southern city.
It's nice to feel useful again. It's nice to be back in here with all of the staff and making some food and seeing the customers again, but it's definitely different, selling through a doorway. It's bloody freezing cold today, so the doors are wide open, so we're freezing our asses off, but at least we're here, right?
But don't expect eggs benny on the menu just yet.
It's a much reduced menu because you're not poaching eggs or anything like that. So we spent, I think, 6 hours baking yesterday, and then we're just going to play it by ear, day by day. If it's cold, it'll be quieter, and I don't know. You just don't know what to expect this time. People were desperate last time because it had been 5 weeks, whereas now, people prepared for this. They've got coffee machines at home, but we've been good. It's been steady enough.
Hannah Boyd waited in line for a coffee, preparing for her first day back in the office.
So a lot of my employees are on site today, which is great because it means that a lot of people who have been otherwise not being able to do any work from home can do so safely on site. It's good. I'm liking the change, and if everyone can do it safely, then it shouldn't be a problem.
An iced latte hit the spot for Abby Berry at Addington's Coffee Co-op in Christchurch.
I'm a barista myself, so it's been tough not having the good stuff, but it's all right. And like those avalanche sachets, they're quite good, but nothing beats the real thing, yeah.
One of the co-op's baristas is frothing to be back at work and busy with coffee orders.
I'm not too sure. Maybe there was at least 200. Maybe? I'm not sure. I feel like I'm bad, but there was at least a rush for an hour and a half.
But she's still getting used to everyone being masked up.
Or there was a couple of people that I saw who I recognised after a minute because of their mask. And so I was just like, hey, how's it going? And then I realised it was one of our regulars. Yeah, a double take. Yeah, which is funny. But now it's been nice to catch up with everyone and see how they've been doing on lockdown. Just seeing friendly faces.
Indy Webb went for an oat milk mocha for her morning fix.
It's just nice to have an outing. I have coffee at home, but it's not really the same experience, I just really miss the environment of it and, kind of a great start to the morning.
It was a busy morning for one delivery driver waiting outside McDonald's in Linwood.
I think people were waiting for this for quite a while now.
Yeah. How many deliveries do you reckon you've done this morning?
So far I've got I've got two, one from Ferry Road and one from here. Wow. And it's looking busy. Drivers coming and going.
In Nelson, Sarah Sharp is keen to support her local eateries and already has today's menu mapped out.
And I'm really looking forward to indulging in a raspberry donut from Hardy Street Eatery, and then this evening I'm ordering some gnocchi from Arden.
Alison Caldry couldn't wait to take the first sip of her takeaway long black, riding her bike along the waterfront to a small coffee caravan by the Nelson Marina.
Yeah, we do it every day, pretty much. We've got a few favourite places around town, but we come down here quite often because it's just so beautiful.
South Island businesses are raising a glass to those supporting them, saying it's especially welcome after a tough few weeks.
Far north landowners have been given the green light to take billions of litres of water from an underground aquifer. The water, which will be mainly used for avocado orchards, will come out of the Aupuri aquifer, which sits right at the top of the Motu. Many are welcoming the consents, but the decision's disappointed some locals who believe the environmental risks are greater than the economic rewards. Nita Blake-Person reports.
Heading up to Cape Reinga, avocado orchards sprawl out from State Highway 1. Maria Mino Kapakingi, the chief executive of Te Runanganui o Te Aupori, hopes news her hapu's water consent has been granted will boost that.
You get to a point where you come across avocados to the right and to the left of you, and you think you're never going to come out of that because there's so much of that grown. But once you come up into our end of the world, that stops because we haven't had the opportunity in that same way.
Independent commissioners acting on behalf of the Northland Regional Council have granted consents to a group of 22 landowners to take 4.5 million cubic metres from the Aupori aquifer. Maria Mino Kapakingi is excited it's got the green light because it aligns with what the hapu wants to do and believes is right.
You know, instantly you're talking about jobs, and we're talking about jobs that are meaningful and that are related to your own whenua. And when we've got a lot of young ones that are going, listen, I'm happy to come home, but have you got a job for me, Auntie? Okay, yes, I have.
Kapakingi says they've had teams looking at what to do with the land and now have the opportunity to make that happen. But the decision hasn't been wholly welcomed. Of the 113 submissions on the application, 92 were opposed. Concerns included long-term impacts on the aquifer, effects on existing bores, water quality and contamination, ecological impacts, saltwater intrusion and cultural considerations. Among those opposed is Kevin Matthews, who chairs the local conservation group Bushland Trust.
I still think that there's a lot of unknowns within the aquifer, its connection to the range south of Kaitaia, that's the Terekino range, and the recharge values.
The Department of Conservation also opposed the application, saying water features were at risk, including wetlands drying out, changes in dune lake levels and harm to threatened fish species. Matthews also thinks there isn't enough information around how wetlands will be affected.
The recharge values are as high as they are. I strongly question why the water has got a mean average age of beyond 200 years. I think there's a big question around the life of our aquifers are in their current state.
The independent commissioners say the proposed take is only 0.16% of the total groundwater stored within the aquifer in an average year. They say while the abstraction sought is large in terms of quantity, it's relatively small in comparison to what's available annually. Northland Regional Council Regulatory Services Manager Colin Dowell says it's a thorough decision.
It's hard to judge if it's going to allay the concerns of all submitters, but what I can say is that the commissioners ran a very robust process. They required caucusing of the experts. They've come up with a comprehensive decision. They've certainly taken into account the concerns that submitters raised.
Maria Mino Kapakingi is asking people to keep an open mind about the water and what comes next.
We're smart tribal people. We know just as well as anyone else and get the right science behind us to make the right decisions for our whenua and for our whānau.
The Commissioner's decision is open to appeal for 15 working days.
After years during which music was banned, the creation of a girls-only orchestra in Afghanistan stood as a beacon of culture and progress. Now the Taliban is back and the music must stop once again. But the orchestra's conductor, Zarifa Adiba, who's in Kyrgyzstan, told the BBC she hopes one day she can return.
Zohra Orchestra is the first all-female orchestra of Afghanistan, which was created in 2015. We were 28 members, and the girls are all from all over Afghanistan. We played many concerts in Afghanistan. Every time we used to perform, it was a risk of life. But at the same time, it was empowering. It was a hope. It was a very strong thing to be done in that country. It was a voice to many girls around my country. It was difficult, but at the same time, it was worth it. Afghanistan 2 years ago. I'm studying at the American University of Central Asia at the moment, so I haven't performed with the Zohar Orchestra since then, but I'm in touch with all my colleagues. They are not playing right now. As you maybe are aware, Taliban, that they have announced that music is not allowed anymore because it's haram or forbidden in the country. You and all the listeners can imagine that girls who have risked their life to play for a peaceful Afghanistan, now they are not allowed to play anymore. Just imagine a country without music. These past couple of days, I have been so hopeless about my future, about music, about everything. Then I talked to Dr. Sarmas. He's the founder of Afghanistan National Institute of Music. I told him that I just don't have any hope anymore that we are going to play again. These all dreams and goals that we have been creating for ourselves and for our country, I guess this all just shattered in a blink of an eye. He said that Zarifa, without hope, it is like a body without soul. So just keep that soul, have hope that we're gonna make it.
We're pretty much out of time. The late news team will keep you updated throughout the night. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi o Pōpō. First up tomorrow morning from 5 a.m, an inner-city Auckland restaurateur calls for resurgent payments to be pegged to alert levels to help businesses like hers survive their 6th lockdown. Now, don't forget, kaua e ware te atatero I a moto. You can check out our videos and stories online. Check out that one from the 2 nicks on the southern border of the city. All the excuses under the sun there. Kia pai tōpō. Have a great evening.
Kia ora tātou. RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Ko Sarah Thompson tōku ingoa. A union says a call for nurses to go to